dreams of perhaps being the first guy to do Ironman and maybe set my sights on a really long ultra run. And I was kind of fantasizing about doing a 100-mile run. And as good fortune would have it in my life all the time, no sooner do I start having kind of crazy wild hair ambitions than I am quickly humbled. Because within a matter of weeks of me starting to think this through, because I didn't know that there were these other ultra runners out there with vision loss, I came to know Jason Romero of Colorado. And he wasn't just a guy who's done Ironman, has done ultra runs. He's done Leadville. We just watched a film earlier today that was made about him in which he crossed, he ran a 183-mile run across the Puerto Rican island.
Wow.
He, this past year, ran Badwater, 135 miles.
Wow.
In 120-degree temperature.
Oh.
He was an attorney, he's been a CEO and an executive. He has 3 children. One of them with special needs with autism, a single dad. He's an amazing inspiration. And I asked him to just come up here and just share a little bit with you, just give you like a 10 or 11 minute glimpse into his life of vision loss and the impact that this sort of thing has in his life. So Jason.
Thank you, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. So Richard asked me to come up and keep it to 10, 11 minutes. It's kind of hard on me, so Richard might have to give me the hook. Okay? And share a little bit of my story. So I want to take you through kind of what's happened in my life, which is I have RP, and what that means is basically lose your peripheral vision, and then usually sometimes acuity, and it's also accompanied by night blindness. Sometimes people lose all sight, sometimes people don't. I'm 45 years old right now, and what happened was I was diagnosed when I was 14 years old, and at that point in time when I was diagnosed, I was being raised by a single mother, and I went to the doctor, and the doctor said, "You have RP," and I said, "Well, what does that mean?" And the doctor said, "Well, what do you want to do when you get older?" And I said, "I'm going to be a doctor, a lawyer. My mother, my brother and I are going to be the first ones to go to college." So the doctor looks straight at me then and says, "Forget about it. You'll be blind in 15 years. Learn to do something with your hands." And 85% of blind people are unemployed, so start dealing with it now. So I'm 14 years old, right? So basically dash your dreams and forget about it. Well, good thing was as a teenager I didn't listen to any adults. Which I'm learning now, I got a 16-year-old, right? So I didn't listen to him, I went on with my life. I'll fast forward now to I'm fast forward to 44. And vision decreased. I went through a career of being an attorney, worked for GE, was general manager of GE Capital in Puerto Rico, vice president of global operations for Western Union, had a 2,500 person organization across the world, CEO of a nonprofit, helping kids with autism. And so fast forward to about a year and a half ago, and I find myself lying in my bed. And this wasn't just one day lying in my bed. I could leave in my bed for 3 weeks in a deep depression. I had become legally blind. I had stopped driving. I wasn't working. I was unemployed. And I was sitting there like my world is over. I had enjoyed ultra running, but I was like, I don't even know how this is going to happen. Is everything gone and done? Until, thank goodness for the internet, I Googled blind ultra runner. And you know whose name popped up? The guy who was just on stage before, Richard Hunter. I listened to Richard's podcast, first podcast I ever listened to, and I knew I had to talk to this man. So that night, I didn't stop researching until finally I found the guy's email, and I sent him a note, and he responded back to me, and I had a chance to talk to Richard. And Richard changed my life at that point. I went to a counselor. I found professional counseling, and it was interesting because the counselor wanted me to take meds. I was kind of vehemently opposed to it. I realized now maybe you do need it, but I said I was stubborn. I said I'll do it through exercise, and I like to run. And the guy looked at me like, "You're crazy." I said, "Well, I I'm breaking a sweat. And I did, and what happened was when I talked to Richard, actually, Richard told me about this race last year. And he said, would you be willing to come to CIM? I signed up for CIM. And it was life-changing. But what happened for me with running and athleticism, and I think what's all going on here, and I think all of us, there was a mentor who was a mentor to me who's visually impaired. He once told me, a person with vision loss is always at some level or state of depression or potential to slip into it. And what I realized was that through activity and through continuing to run, and what I thought was just a hobby or an addiction of running these ultras, actually helped to be my greatest savior. And last year when I came here, I did come here and I met Adrian Broca, I met Richard, I met some people, but I didn't meet everybody. Last year I was even able to win the event, which was more than I ever imagined. And I finally come out of the closet as a blind person. I wear a pin now that says blind. And what's happened since that time, since being in that bed and continuing to run, I was selected to be on Team USA. And I ran at the Paralympic World Championships in London this last year. I got fourth. Just for the record, that was in the slow category, so I couldn't beat Aaron, right? But or Dawn. But for the slow, more sighted people, fourth in the world. That wasn't bad. And I ran across Puerto Rico earlier this year. I ran Badwater. I went to Greece. I got 100 miles at the Spartathlon done. So all of these amazing things have happened, and that's as a result of this organization, where we're all sitting here celebrating part of this night and this event, and this USABA. The night that I also talked to Richard, I told Marcus and Ryan, but I joined USABA as a lifetime member because I knew, I'm going to be blind for the rest of my life. This organization is a great organization, and I'm here, to support it. So those were, that's kind of how I ended up here, and I kind of continue to do this. But what I want to talk about is kind of like the learnings also that I learned as a result of this journey of going blind through depression, leaning on running, being a single dad, all this stuff. And the learnings are that adversity is always going to happen in your life. I talked about this, I was talking about it with Tony at the table. Whenever I'm in an ultra, long run, something bad's going to happen. You're going to kick a toe and lose a toenail. You have to rip that thing off. Or your feet are going to swell, you have to find a solution. Or you're going to twist an ankle and you're going to have to figure out some way to continue going forward, but you don't give up. So adversity is going to happen. You're going to go blind and we're going to figure out how to use a cane. Or you're going to go blind and want to run and we're going to lean on, Richard's going to go to Guiding Eyes and get them to create a running guide dog program. Adversity is going to happen and you're going to adapt. And that's the thing that I've learned too with being in the blind community. We are some of the most adaptive and versatile people around. In my business career, I always tried to force people to embrace change, to be change agents. I'm sitting in a room full of athletes here. That's what you do. And that's the beautiful thing. That's one of the great learnings that I learned as a result of this journey. Have a sense of humor is the other thing too. If you can't laugh at your blindness and the silliness that you get, what is it? Guys, with Don Balcom yesterday on the airplane. This guy, I didn't know him from Peter, Paul, or Mary. And he couldn't stop talking, And I would just sit there laughing. He's cracking jokes and hit something, and he's like, I didn't see that. And somebody said, hey, I'll see you later. And Don yells out, hey, I'll hear you later. But it's examples like that, like Don Balcom. And the other thing too is, Don's also an inspirational guy too, because look at the work ethic that's employed. There's Don supporting a family, gets up at 3 in the morning, gets his workout in, goes works 9-10 hours a day, comes back home, gives family love, and then continues and does it nonstop. So a sense of humor and that type of work ethic is phenomenal. The other thing I learned is faith, and that's probably the biggest learning, which is we're not here alone. And that doesn't just mean your family or whatever, but whatever your faith or belief system is, when you're out there tomorrow, when you're out there going through a very tough time, you don't have to do it alone. You don't have to do it alone. And that leads me to my final point, which is lend a hand. And that's the biggest lesson, frankly, that Richard Hunter has given to me. In the last year, I've called Richard probably 4 times when I've been down in the ditch and in the trenches. And Richard always looks at me like, hey, like I'm gonna pick him up, like I'm gonna give him a pep talk, and I'm like, Rich, I'm about to start crying, And I don't even know if you know this, Richard, but that's what you do, and it's probably what you do for a lot of us. But what Richard did to me was to lend a hand to me and help me continue along my journey of losing my eyesight, but obviously not losing my vision. And Richard was the reminder to me always that, going blind it's exactly what you do. You lose eyesight, but you don't lose your vision, or you don't lose your love for life. And there is no quit. There's just a different way of living life. That's kind of my spiel. And the other piece too is that for us here tonight, we got to thank those who are around us and those who sponsor us, not just our financial sponsors we all recognize here tonight, but our guides and our guide runners, our family, our kids who sit there and they have to go through this as well, but they learn such a tremendous amount out of this journey of going blind. And frankly, with one closing final thought, when people kind of ask me, what's the hardest part of going blind? I don't really look at it that way, and I look at it as, frankly, it's a gift, because it's taught me to be who I am and to approach life how I do. And sometimes that inspires other people, and that's a real gift where you can share with other people. It's not comfortable for me right now to get up in front of a group and a lot of faces. I'm glad I don't see that well, because I don't see your eyes. Probably make me really nervous. But to be vulnerable like this and to tell you, I went through depression. I'm probably still on the verge at many times, and I leaned heavily on other folks, and I sat in my room and cried and worried about the fact that I may not come out and I may isolate myself. It's difficult. But the other thing I realized too is sharing that with this group of people. Probably some of you have had those same thoughts, and if we lean on each other and help one another, we're not alone. We can't help each other. So with that said, I'm going to try to beat Don Balcom tomorrow.
Yeah.